Hey, how's it going? I'm Dan Fradenburgh, and this is the first episode of Because I Wanna. And you may know me from Figure It Out, the Dream Job series. I'm going to borrow some bits and pieces from the Dream Job series that I do. And Figure It Out, the book is about attention to detail. But my guest today is Bob Heath. How are you today, Bob?
I'm doing awesome. How
Excellent.
about you, Dan?
I'm fantastic. And I want to fence in the conversation a little bit for the people in the audience. A lot of the people who know me personally know that I'm always up to something that's a little bit off the beaten path. But let's get back to the figure it out dream job idea. I knew that I wasn't the only person who was faced with potentially changing careers and at the most inopportune time. And when that's the case, sometimes you don't have the advantages of when you're younger, when your parents are still around, things like that. And so I have dream job holders or people who've had enviable positions, such as being a Broadway opera singer or a internationally award-winning composer, people who played in the NFL, things like that. And every time I ask them, how can somebody potentially end up where you are if they had no friends, family, or cash? Now, Bob, I saw your record as far as your time at Microsoft and your time at MIT, which, if you're unaware, that's a big deal as far as, you need to have a big brain if you want to hang out at MIT, or you're going to be left in everybody's dust. There's no two ways about it, and I saw that. I guess here's a little starting point. Let's talk about higher education and the environment that you wind up in. But first, Bob, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit as far as how you introduce yourself these days?
Sure. My name is Bob Heath. I'm Principal Research Fellow at Lesant Applied Research Center.
hmm Excellent, excellent. And so you had time at Microsoft, and the thing that really
Yep.
jumped out to me was the number of things that require that you're a sharp cookie that are in your resume, but you're also an advocate for dyslexia and dyslexia awareness, I believe. Can you say a thing or two on that subject and how that came to be something that you spend time on?
Yep. Yeah. I always had a sense that I was dyslexic before I even knew the term dyslexic. Struggled through grade school. Reading, writing was torturous for me. Love stories, love movies. Forced myself to read through books because I loved the story. It wasn't till much later in life I found out, yeah, there's this thing called the neurodivergent matrix, and my personality in that just totally mapped into the realm of dyslexic.
Okay, so what are some of well, actually, first of all, let's talk about the internet and letting information out there. But before I got involved in the internet, I was very apprehensive, and that's because I spent so much time on the anonymous part of the internet where people were using usernames so they could basically be as miserable as they wanted with no consequences at all. So now, of course, I already had thick skin because when I was taking electrical engineering, my first summer, I was working the door at a comedy club. And right now, my physique is fairly similar to how I was after my first year of university, which that's a little bit of a flex, but I'm not the most imposing looking dude. And so that wasn't my piece of the puzzle as far as working the door. It was more like, basically calming situations if they came up, which didn't happen all that often. But as far as dyslexia goes, one of the things for me that really jumps out, my mother-in-law, she passed a while ago, but she never learned how to read, and she was Taiwanese, so of course that meant that people typically would have been able to read Chinese, but of course she was also of a generation where that was optional for women. and that is not the way things are in Taiwan right now. But so as far as your activities to spread dyslexia awareness, what sort of things have you done or have proved to be successful? What's a good way for someone with a cause such as dyslexia to get the word out?
One of the things I see going on, and I think Kate Griggs, I don't know if you've seen her on LinkedIn and that, is really doing a fantastic job leading the charge, specifically focused on what she calls dyslexic thinking or made by dyslexia. I believe it's sponsored by Richard Branson, Virgin Records, Virgin Shipping, Virgin everything, Virgin Space. But anyways, I went to a seminar back around 2004. My grandson is on the autistic side of the spectrum.
Mhm.
And I went to this with my daughter, who's a grade school teacher, and my daughter-in-law, the parent of our grandson. And it was put on by Stanford University. And they had a broad staff of very successful people in Silicon Valley, from education, medicine, finance, and these were, top names around Silicon Valley, which has top names in the world in industry. And they all were on the spectrum, some severe. There was a professor of law at Stanford that couldn't read, and because his dyslexic was so severe. So you say, how did he get his law degree? His mother read him all his law books. And then he would try to capture through notes more pictorial than write. He could write, but he just couldn't read the law books, the complexity and that. But he could listen to it. So his mother told it in story format. One of the leading capital venturalists, I'm saying that wrong. Anyways, VCs in Silicon Valley, one of the wealthiest places on the world, is extreme autistic.
Hmm.
And that. And so he could crunch the numbers in his head that I have struggled on a calculator. And the light went on. These aren't disabilities. These are focus. I saw you on a video playing guitar. Well, if you look at my background, blurred as it is,
Yeah, I
you're going
see
to see
that.
a lot of guitars. I'm a guitar collector, not so much a player in that. But we all have our strengths in that, and we try to live our life to those strengths. Well, they're now starting to show what I call the neurodivergent matrix is pointing out your strengths. And it also shows you, okay, this is my weakness. I might want to beef it up a bit, but more importantly, can I partner? Can I find somebody and partner? And if you look back at the greatest successes in history, even currently, Bill Gates, Paul Allen. Bill Gates, autistic, Paul Allen, dyslexic. Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak. Steve Wozniak, dyslexic. Steve Jobs, autistic. You go back in history, and even before those mental capacities were defined, you're seeing that they said, oh, Einstein actually showed both. So it's not a spectrum, it's not linear, it's a matrix. And his brain would think as a dyslexic when he's trying to explain the complex concepts to people, especially students, and it would become autistic when he's digging into the physics, subatomic particles and reactions. And that, to me, it's just fascinating. It's
Yeah.
just fascinating. We talk about the computers and AI and everything. My personal opinion, I'm sorry for stepping on some toes out there. AI doesn't stand a chance against the human mind because we haven't even scratched the surface on how our mind works.
That is fantastic, and it's funny because I think I'm really showing how there's just so much to mention and discuss on this subject. And I think part of it, it sounds a little bit like what many people call right brain, left brain as well, which I
Yeah.
hear is better described as Gestalt brain and I forgot the other term. There's it's like the backup, basically the Gestalt,
Yeah.
meaning that half your brain thinks it's running the entire show, even though the other half is running in parallel, more or less. I guess the other thing too, which because I didn't tie back the story about my mother-in-law never learning how to read to the dyslexia information that I heard. This would have been about let me see here. So yeah, that would have been about 18 years ago.
Yeah.
I heard a study that dyslexia in, I'll call it romanized languages, in other words, alphabetical words, languages that use the alphabet going from left to right, have individual characters and have some sort of phonetic component to it, versus the part of your brain that is responsible for reading Chinese. They're different bits of the brain, apparently. So when I found that out, because I already had learned how to read in Chinese, that made me have an aha moment of like, oh my goodness, that means people can still be literate even though they have dyslexia. They just have to do the unintuitive part of reading in a different language. But you're more describing dyslexia as a subcategory, like a superpower, which I think is very, very exciting. So you don't want to just, marginalize people who have it. But the idea that came to mind when you were speaking was a quote from Shakespeare, who described the youthful people as those with uncluttered minds. Now, I'm curious if like that applies at all to the dyslexics that you run into. Like perhaps they're not burdened down by the amount of content that they've been forced to read over their time, or something like that. Like, does that stick at all? Does that fit the bill?
It doesn't relate so much to me. I remember telling people, I'd have to have 2 shots of whiskey or a 6-pack of beer to get down to where I could concentrate on one train of thought, which was a challenge. In reality, it was a challenge because I'm thinking of 50,000 things, and then it's what bubbles to the surface. So what I do find common with dyslexic, they're easily distracted. And
Hmm.
that includes me too. Walking down the street, squirrel. Yeah. And so I've got to say, there's a lot going through my mind, and it's more I visualize
Hmm.
and I verbalize the content. In my mind, I'm not seeing words, I'm not seeing structure, I'm not seeing somebody talking. I'm seeing a motion picture playing in my mind. It's just like I went to the theater and they got 20 screens playing different movies, and I'm saying, oh, that looks good, oh, that looks good. So yes, as I just fall asleep, as I just wake up, is where I got to take the notes for an idea that I had out of a dream, whatever it was. That's where I have a focus point, and then say, okay, here's how I'm going through the day, and force myself back into the focus. And I think that has a lot to do with I've read entire chapters in book and couldn't tell you a single word I just read because my mind wandered off.
Yeah.
And yeah, I followed the lines.
Yeah, it's interesting because what you're describing, like I've heard it applied to just introverted characters. It basically means like if
Yeah,
you have a lot going on the inside of your head, compared to the average person who may be only paying attention to the thing that's directly in front of them. That's usually like in my circle, that's what's described as an introverted tendency. So that's really interesting. And I think that because of the way you've put it, I think we're in safe territory to get into the edgier question that I really was trying to hint at, which is that, as I said, I was concerned about getting out there on the internet because I'd been exposed to enough internet trolls to know how miserable they could be. But the nice thing
yeah,
about the comedy club experience is that I had thick skin. I'd heard
yeah.
some of the nastiest things that people could really, dream up. So, things on the internet are basically a bit of a variation on that. But I guess if I'm going to put the sharpest, nastiest word I can put on it, as far as a fear of being upfront when it comes to neurodivergence, is the issue of eugenics. I think that's the scariest one. So self-identifying as anything at all makes it
Yeah.
really easy to target you personally. And it doesn't matter if it's like race, gender, like whatever it is. That's the nature of databases. So now, of course, like you've been hanging around with brainiacs your entire life. I'll just leave it at this and say, comment.
Um, I spent 8 years, 6 stories underground at Lawrence Livermore Lab. You talk about brainiacs. It's the comical movie where you see people walking and they walk into a ditch or ride their bicycle into a ditch because their mind is in the clouds. Yes, that was ambulances every day. Out of that, went to private consulting and technology, grew up right next to Silicon Valley. So, I mean, it was easy access to technology. From that, got picked up by Microsoft, and Microsoft opened a ton of doors. So when I tell the stories about going to MIT, that was sponsored by Microsoft. Georgetown, sponsored by Microsoft. Stanford, Berkeley, that was all sponsored through Microsoft because they have research centers there. And I said, well, if I'm going to spend time there, I'm going to get something to further my education there. I mean, it's a two-way, I'm there. It wasn't at Micro. In fact, it benefited Microsoft because I'm understanding more. So I just leveraged my time. I don't know if that comes from dyslexic thinking, but I'm constantly saying, how can you get the best out of this effort? How can you get the best out of your time? And yeah, and Microsoft, talk about brainiacs. The time it really scared me was when the three companies with the electronic voting machines came out, and they came to Microsoft to pitch and say, we got this technology, your endorsement would be great. And I'm sitting next to this guy that looked like he just walked off Berkeley campus, thick glasses, curly hair, slender, got the t-shirt on. And they give us this book. It's 2,400 and some odd pages long. And it's all the regulations on voting and electronic voting. The next day, one of the presenters making a comment, the guy next to me says, excuse me, you misstated that. And the guy goes, what are you talking about? He goes, you just said this, and this is what the text says. And the guy goes, no. He goes, I'm pretty sure. The guy goes, well, you got the book in front of you. Turned, and he's just talking. He's not, nothing's in front of him. He goes, open to page 1269, paragraph 3. Yes. And
Yeah.
he quotes it. And I'm thinking, okay, you know, I like having something upstairs because it just makes life more enjoyable. Understanding and having a good time in life, yes. But I never want to be that. You know, there's been a few people in my life I totally admire, but that's just scary smart.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's one of my favorite things to watch. It doesn't matter if it's inside the head or outside the head. If somebody can, perform at that Olympic level on things like that, that's
Oh,
fantastic. So one of my guests in the past, though, he was in I think it was the 1990 Guinness
yeah.
Book of World Records for world's fastest reader. And
Wow.
yeah, he did it on TV and all that kind of stuff. And now, like it's been a few years since I interviewed him, so I can lay out my cards a little bit more. So I saw him in the first episode of the Daily Show with Jon Stewart. It was him and Howard Stern, and
Yeah.
they had him speed read through Howard's book, and they tested on him, right? So I did the same thing with my book, Figure It Out, and it's 32,000 words, and he blasted through it in 90 seconds. And he was able to pull out a couple different things about it. So it's really interesting to get inside out. He was kind enough to give me his course on speed reading, so there absolutely are verifiable elements to his teaching that help increase your reading speed, which is fantastic. But as far as what you just described with memory gymnastics, there's photographic memory, and then there's also episodic.
Yeah.
You've heard the term episodic, and if you have, please give some sort of explanation of what it is.
not so much episodic, but my understanding of it is you learn from the context. You learn from whether the context is, live world, a book or a movie or whatever. You learn from the context of that. Where the other one is you have the memory of it, but you don't have the full understanding. Like you can quote a text, photographic memory. You can quote the text that you read, but can you explain it? That
Okay.
is my rudimentary understanding.
Okay.
So
Okay.
correct
Cool.
me because
Right.
that's a guess.
Right. Because yeah, I just didn't want to color your definition for it. So yeah, the main thing is yeah, the distinction between photographic and episodic, and so I think the part where in that description, like it departed from my own experience, is just remembering your own perspective as a witness for whatever's recalled, right? So my episodic memory means that when I remember things, it's like a TiVo. I can rewind it and play it again. So there are conversations I had, decades ago, and I can tell you exactly where everybody was sitting, the shape of the furniture, like things like that. And it even will happen to things where I'm not deliberately trying to memorize them, but there are
Yeah.
some things out there where it just doesn't work like that. And
Yeah.
one of them is Chinese. Okay. I
Yeah.
basically think that it doesn't matter who you are, you need to you have to do your reps, just like working out and
Yeah.
exercising. And the other one is chess. Have you ever spent much time on chess?
That introduced me to my earliest technology. So I tell people I'm analog, not digital, because analog's infinite, digital's binary, one and two. That's all you got, one and zero to choose from. My cousin was employee 169 for Intel Corporation. They only had one building in San Jose, Santa Clara, California, right at the bottom of Silicon Valley. Terrific. I would go down there in the evening after working, get off, go down there because all the managers and that would go home, and Intel would almost become like party town. And they had the early 8-bit Intel processor, CPU, 8080. And they built a computer. There was no PCs out and that. People were wiring and building their own, anyways. And they had a chess game on it. And what it would do, it would give you, E2 to E4. And yeah, it would give you that. It was text and that.
Oh, that's
But
amazing.
it just amazed me that this machine could play chess. And I'm not a very good chess player, but I could tell that thing was way beyond me. And that's when the light went on. I said, okay, I'm seeing the future here and I better get on board. And that's where that trip started.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great.
Yes. So yes, I play a lot of computer chess, not to become a good chess player, just to understand how the technology works.
Excellent. Because that's another thing I'm doing, and I think I don't think it has to be even neurodivergence. I think there's a big part of society that really is compelled to hide itself.
Hmm.
Like there's a certain degree of fakeness where people want to be perceived one way, but the truth is a little bit different. And one of them is I find serious people. I find that there are actually very few serious people, but people tend to
Yeah.
have to pretend that they are, because otherwise you just won't be taken seriously at all. Like you're like joking all the time.
Yeah.
But that's you leave that for the internet. But anyway, my next question comes from what I prepared here from that figure it out dream job sort of perspective, and I guess I'll color the conversation a little by saying my own observation, which is if you go to a top engineering university, I think that who you meet and the relationships you build while you're there wind up having greater. I'm going to be more specific. Because like friends are obviously more important than like do you have $10,000 in the bank or do you have $20,000 in the bank? That I get that part, but I'm saying as far as career and just I guess I'm coming from a parent's perspective. If you were to try and sell somebody on elite education right now, when I'm trying to say, what does an elite education get you these days that the internet just can't provide?
I think you touched on it earlier. It's the association with other people in a common cause. And what I pulled from education, this is specific to me, I'm not saying this is the only value, but education taught me how to think, not what to think. And that it taught me how to process information. Once again, earlier I said I struggle with thousands of thoughts. Part of processing that is learning how to prioritize. Okay, Bob, that's really interesting. You stumbled on this on the internet, but you got this meeting coming up in that. So that's where I contribute to higher education. And then the peer relationship. A lot of those people you stay in touch with. It's interesting the directions you go in life from that. One of the lead CIOs that was at a security conference I was talking at, one of many hundreds of presenters in that, was in the front row, and it was 1999 Dallas in that, and I talked about security. So third the audience, that's where they're getting their paycheck. And I said, yeah, if you believe in security, you believe in a falsehood. There is no such thing. And then I went back and used the analogy. If you had locked your doors and locked your sliding glass door, would you leave your wallet on the kitchen table? And that. And you can see people, I said, well, let's make the question easier. You leave your back door wide open, you leave your front door wide open. Would you leave your wallet on the kitchen table? And that, and everybody, oh, that's easy. No. Okay. If I'm going to steal your wallet, you think I'm worried about scratching your door? Common sense and that, think it through. Well, that got picked up after 9/11. And I got a couple of medals, doesn't matter. I get called into the White House to talk about, remember when you talked about perimeter security is a false. I'm not saying get rid of it. I'm saying treat everything like it doesn't exist. Are you going to do something different in that? No, I'm not going to leave my wallet on the kitchen table, whether the door's locked or not. It's going to go up somewhere away where it's out of sight. I'm not going to tempt in that. Then why are we leaving stuff open within the perimeter of the network when at that time, 1999, Intel did a study, 67% of attacks were coming from inside the firewall. And that was the message. Well, they played the radar for 9/11, and the United States, North America, Canada, yep. The United States had this little green fuzzy hair around it. And they say, we're looking for attacks from Russia, China, outside. And we show all the air traffic once it gets 12 miles out or 12 miles in, 24 miles around North America. And I said, that's interesting. They go, well, your friend, the CIO, was consulting to us at the time. And he goes, we might want to consider this. Oh, no, this, we got the house locked and that, but they're not putting the wallet away. Well, they played 9/11. And only one plane, I think it was Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It didn't show at all. One plane crossed as it came into New York, and they had like 30 seconds. And then they said, here's what we're doing today. You couldn't see North America, everything and that. And they go, and I had no clue. I'm not trying to boast or anything. I had no idea. 9/11, I wasn't thinking that type of security. I was thinking firewall security. Why are we putting all our trust and eggs in that basket? Not to get rid of it, but to say, would we behave differently? Would we think differently if that didn't exist? Why aren't we thinking that way today? That was the premise. And they picked up on it and said, it applies to this too. We got to think differently. So, yeah, long story. Yeah, that's a trait of dyslexia, storytellers.
Wow, that's interesting. That's really interesting. So it's like I'm really speechless, and that means I'm just going to keep on going through my questions because
Sure.
keeping the things rolling here. And I'm definitely going to be letting that one digest quite a bit. Well, actually, it's funny. One thing I want to share with you, yes, you and the audience, is right before we started recording, I mentioned to Bob that please don't tell me, like don't fill in the details until we're recording, because one thing I really don't like doing is pretending that I've never heard information before. So yeah, like, and that was gold for me. This is why I do podcasting, is for moments like that just really challenge my preconceptions. But I guess yeah, this is a great question specific to dyslexia, which is what sort of financial burdens do dyslexic people have other than the challenges of traditional employment? So I guess what I mean by that is traditional employment, I think unless you're in a labor intensive work, you're probably going to have to do a lot of paperwork. But that's also
Yeah.
what executive assistants were created for, is to basically, like fence that in and like so I think historically it's probably pretty fair to say that there's been a large number of dyslexic, top of the food chain people. Is there any data to support that?
Oh yeah. I gave you a couple of examples there. You're seeing more and more starting to come out. I never viewed it as a disability.
Hmm.
Um, and I was aware, I didn't know, to the level or whatever, my dyslexia. I used to joke, my parents called me Bob because I'm dyslexic, and that as far back as I can remember. Anyways, long story short, I think that's what makes it a disability when you buy into this. Oh, I'm different, and this different is a weakness
Hmm.
instead of a strength. I learned early on passion for technology in that, but seeing the engineers at Intel, seeing the engineers in Silicon Valley and the different computer clubs, I realized I didn't fit into that mold.
Hmm.
I admired it. Their minds were incredible, and a lot of depth in mathematics and that. I enjoy science, but I never, I struggled with advanced calculus
Hmm.
and that. Everything else kind of came, I,
Hmm.
I had to drop out of advanced calculus and then co-teach another course to get the credits so I could move on in that.
Hmm.
But I realized, okay, I'm not on the engineering side. I'm not on the research scientist side of things, but I enjoy people. I
Hmm.
enjoy meeting people, talking to people, kind of like you said, the ad hoc. You're getting to know people in that. And so when I was at the lab, when I was at MIT, I used that as a strength in that I would mentor people that were introverted, and you get all levels in that. I'd go in there and say, hey, can I help here? Can I explain? I've got to give this talk on this, and I can't talk in front of people. Well, I can't shut up in front of people. So we can balance. There's that partnership in that. And when I went to Microsoft, I remember my wife saying, that's great. They pay well, and it's a great company, but you're not an engineer, and they're all coders and that. And I said, yeah, but they've got to work with their customers, and these engineers can't explain it. So I remember going all the way up saying, I want to work on the human side of this. And that's what got me into Georgetown. When they saw that, they said, okay, we need to make sure you're versed in it from a business perspective. So when you get in those rooms and you're talking to people, the engineer would get kicked out right away because he's talking to boards and he's talking to CEOs and CIOs and that. And they don't want to hear about the nuts and bolts. They want to hear about why this vehicle versus that vehicle and that. So I always say I worked on the human side of the equation and then invite the technical experts in to dig down into it to make sure it works. But okay, here's what we have. Here's where we think it fits your business need. And if I understand your business correctly, you're looking for this, this, and this, and you're struggling with this, this, and this. Okay, let's approach it.
Wow, that's an incredible story, and it's funny because as I look through this, the questions I prepped, and I realized the tone. Part of it is color because another friend of mine who he's getting into the podcast scene. He's a high functioning autistic, but he
Yeah.
still struggles. So like to get his bachelor's degree, it took him 9 years. So,
Yeah.
like just as an example, and he's really working hard and helping get more awareness that there's nothing stopping high functioning autistic people from being very active in the workplace, but it seems like the understanding's not there. There are more disadvantages. So I was coming to this interview kind of from a place of negativity, and I'm really happy to be so pleasantly surprised. Just you're just really showing how there really is a place for everyone, and
Yeah.
honestly, though, it does exacerbate my initial reasoning to get into this line of questioning, which is that I think that our economy is not mature. And the reason why I think it's not mature is because too many people have to do things that they don't actually want to do.
Yeah.
And that's a tough one. I guess I want to quote Mark Cuban when he said that billionaires don't create jobs, entrepreneurs create jobs. And
Yeah.
I think that what you describe as dyslexic, I think that it's many of the key traits in succeeding as an entrepreneur. And it sounds like I wouldn't want to hire somebody who in on the inside of their head they have 30 different televisions all playing on different stations at the same time. But I think that that's not, at least like what I experience in my own very active internal whatever. I don't think that that's the majority of any struggles that I have to express myself. It's more of a matter, and I think it's partly a coping thing. And coming from teaching, what I've learned to do is memorize lists of kind of like courses in school, just
Yeah.
subjects in general, and I make basically a statistical guess on, it's like, okay, so I'm talking to this person, what do I know about them as far as, like their career, like their job, their likes, their dislikes, all that kind of stuff, possible background and whatever. And based on that, what's the likelihood that they encountered advanced calculus? What
Yeah.
is the likelihood that they ended up finding out basic chemistry, things like that, like I'm
Yeah.
mentally going through those lists and saying like, okay, so I what do I have to get this person up to speed on before we can have the intelligent conversation that I'm trying to have. So I guess what I'm saying is that that busyness of the 30 TVs is more like we see a big whole. And if we're going to describe it to somebody at all, we're like, oh man, I have to just narrow down and go this pipeline to explain it. Like, does that sound familiar at all, or is this more of like a me thing?
No, from my perspective, the 30 TVs playing in my mind or the 30 radio stations, where I learned to benefit from that was in conversations. And somebody's talking about a challenge or something, and it's playing on this station over here. Then I can focus. And one common thing you'll read about dyslexia is they can give you the solution rapidly, and it's a well vented solution. They just can't tell you the steps of how they got to it, because at the time they got to it, the other 30 stations were playing in that. So then you talk about, like, you just raised something there,
Hmm.
and oh, okay, I'm on this channel. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this doesn't have to do with the neurodivergent, but everybody's in it. Everybody's in that matrix.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not thinking. You're 6 feet under. And that one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had was being able to go around to different high schools and talk to the kids. And always, they would invite me in. Hey, you're at Microsoft. That's a dream company, a dream job. Come on in here and tell, my students how you got that, into that career and that company and that. Okay, I'm not ashamed. If that's what opened the door, I'm going to take advantage. But the message I wanted to tell the student is there's nothing you can think of that you would have passion about as a hobby, as an interest. Nothing that somebody isn't being paid to do it. And that. So find out what your passions or passion is. The world's your playground. What is it that you would do freely? I worked at Microsoft for 2 months before I found out what the paycheck was. It never came up in the conversation. I knew you're a great company, you got great people, you're going to pay them right. What I saw was the opportunity to go into the hornet's nest and learn from the people that were actually, designing, inventing it, and how they thought and how they worked and who they worked with. And that was an education beyond anything. So yes, that's the message I tell anybody at any age. What is your passion? What gets you excited when you wake up in the morning? Don't think about how it makes money. Just think about what it is. And then do a little research on that topic. Every high school, maybe 1 or 2 out of a couple hundred, they always come up with one thing, and it's always a boy, probably junior, senior year. And he comes up with one topic. And I said, well, in the States, you might have to move to Nevada. But it's a career. No further.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. All right. So we ended up meeting through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great way to get a hold of me, especially because I have this pretty distinct last name. It makes me really easy to find. If you want to check out Amazon, I've got a few different business skill building related topics, different publications that are available there. But Bob, if people want to reach out to you, is LinkedIn the best way? I imagine as an advocate of dyslexia, or if they just want, if they have any questions, what are the best ways to reach out?
Yeah, LinkedIn's got my email address. I think it's got both my business and personal in that. Yeah, feel free to reach out. 99% of the time, I'm going to redirect you to the expert in that area if I know them. If not, at least subject matter and help research if you need. Like I said, people are my passion. Just, understanding people, yourself included, meeting people. Like I said, I went on there and saw you playing the guitar, and I said, boy, I wish I could play the guitar because I got like 12 of them hanging on the wall here.
Well, well, that's the thing, like I'm doing chess right now just to, make sure preservation of neuroplasticity. So, don't count yourself out. Maybe I can show you a couple things and,
Yeah.
Hey, you said find your passion, right? And that was it for me. It was like guitar. I wanted to play guitar, but the financial part bugged me. I knew it wasn't really an option for me. So my guidance counselor told me to go into electrical engineering, and here we are.
Awesome.
Isn't that fun?
Awesome.
All right, so thanks a lot for that. And my last part I want to mention, it's my public service announcement that I tend to do in these YouTube videos. If you've been watching this episode and experiencing searing pains in your eyeballs and like migraine-like symptoms, I'm highly confident it's due to the downright hideous subscribe button that's down there, and you can just hit it for free. Full disclosure, I want you to start paying for these videos instead of me, so I need lots of people to hit it. But the drawback, the trade-off for you, just so we're clear, is that my videos may show up on your list of suggestions, but you can feel free to ignore those suggestions, because quite frankly, I just appreciate the fact that you spent this time with me. Just like Bob, this has been great getting to know you. Thanks for joining.
You bet, sir. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks.
Does nothing but put more money in the pot.
Right.
If we talk about just the investor side, Shane talked about the sponsor side a little bit. I'll talk about the investor side. Okay, so you want the most money in terms of return with the least risk. All right, you want to do it yourself. you can go get 13 or 14%. You're going to do all the underwriting. It's not going to be passive.
If you bet, probably not.
I think I'd have to bet at least 2,500 before they fold.
And the pot is
4,000.
4,000. Yeah, I think you're right, but I'd rather just check.
Okay.
First position, you have the right of collection and the right of foreclosure or sheriff's sale, wherever you're at.
Hey there, are you interested in commercial real estate deals? Would you like to build your network of investors and deal sponsors? Well, the best thing I can do for you is have you appear on a chance encounter interview as featured on dandoesdeals.com. You may know me from 506BME or as a top commercial real estate voice on LinkedIn. And if I had to think of the top factors in your success in commercial real estate, my top two would be your network and your ability to effectively explain how deals work with effective communication. The 15-minute chance encounter format, it checks both of those boxes, and they ensure that you can share your private deals with me without the SEC calling it a public solicitation. So hop onto LinkedIn. You can see my name is over here, Dan Fradenburgh, and search for my name. And the best way to reach me and book that is to message me through LinkedIn. And don't worry, it doesn't matter if you decided to enter this space just last week or 2 weeks ago, or if it was decades ago. It'll be fun and easy to look good. We're just asking multiple choice questions based on your core competencies you look to contribute, your level of sophistication, all that kind of stuff. So I hope to hear from you soon. Thanks a lot.